What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Nerdy Professor podcast, where we talk about everything black, bold, and beautiful. I'm your host, the Nerdy Professor, and in today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Underground Railroad and how Canada became a sanctuary for freedom seekers and why they chose Canada. As the 19th century unfolded, a wave of change began to sweep across the globe. Among this sweeping wave was some of the most defining conflicts, like the French and Indian War, fought between Great Britain and France in North America from 1754 to 1763, and the larger 7 Years' War. This was followed by the American Revolution and its impact on Canada, which we discussed in the last episode. Then came the War of 1812, also a defining moment shaping the borders between Canada and the United States. In the midst of all these winds of change were movements for abolition, and it had gained momentum, and Canada was no exception to these winds of change. Looking at these border-shaping conflicts and the growing call for abolition, there is a common thread that ties them all together: the struggle for freedom. This battle for liberty, whether in the form of escaping the chains of slavery or asserting one's voice against oppressive forces, continues across time and shows itself in unexpected places, like the anime Carol and Tuesday. In Carol and Tuesday, the story centers around two young women, Carol, an orphan who grew up in a refugee camp, and Tuesday, a privileged girl rebelling against her family's expectations. The two come from vastly different backgrounds, but yet they share a common dream: to make music that can truly move people and change the world. Their story isn't easy. They face too many complications in their journey to make it in the music industry, from a highly commercialized music industry, a society that undervalues the artistic vision, and other struggles that almost tear them apart. But what stands out in their story is their shared sense of fighting for freedom. Freedom in this context isn't about escaping physical chains, like the black people who fled to Canada, but also expressing oneself in a world that tries to silence or commercialize that expression. This resonates deeply with the struggles faced by those who escaped slavery in the United States. Like Carol and Tuesday, the enslaved people weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to live as free people, to express their humanity, and to forge a new future beyond the confines of oppression. The two protagonists in Carol and Tuesday have a dream of creating music that will shake the foundations of society that has made music a product rather than an art form. They encounter forces that try to control them, limit their opportunities, and even exploit them. This is oddly similar to the freedom seekers traveling northward on the Underground Railroad. They weren't just escaping physical violence, they were escaping a system that dehumanized them and attempted to stifle their potential as individuals. Just like the Underground Railroad, Carol and Tuesday is built on the idea of resistance, resisting societal structures that seek to limit freedom and creativity. In their journey, Carol and Tuesday learn to trust in their ability to make a change and to believe in their own worth. The themes of perseverance, self-expression, and community resonate with the experiences of those fleeing enslavement. The Underground Railroad wasn't simply a physical journey, it was a spiritual and psychological one too, much like the struggles Carol and Tuesday faced to pursue their art despite constant resistance. The anime also highlights the power of collaboration. Carol and Tuesday's partnership, despite their differences, embodies the power of shared vision and mutual support. You see this in the first episode when they have their first jam session. Tuesday is playing her guitar too fast, but Carol supports her by slowing down, allowing her the space to slow down and feel what they're creating. And Tuesday, creating lyrics for Carol's song that originally conveyed feelings that no one on the bridge connected to except Tuesday. In the same way, the Underground Railroad functioned as a collective effort, a network of abolitionists, freed individuals, and communities coming together to help the oppressed escape. Just as Carol and Tuesday continue to work together, they also collaborate with others to overcome the challenges in their world. Moreover, the concept of finding one's voice is central to both the anime and the history of the Underground Railroad. For Carol and Tuesday, it's about expressing themselves authentically through music in a world that often tries to commercialize or silence their voices. For those who escaped slavery, it was about finding freedom in every sense, not only in the legal sense, but also in reclaiming their ability to express their humanity, to build families, to create communities, and to assert their place in the world. In the same way that Carol and Tuesday used their art to resist societal expectations, the escapees on the Underground Railroad are also using their actions, running, hiding, seeking safety, as a form of resistance to an oppressive system that sought to define their worth and limit their freedom. Both stories remind us that true freedom is not just about the absence of chains, but about the ability to live authentically and express oneself fully without fear. Imagine being Tuesday, running away from home, seeking the freedom to express yourself. But instead, you're running under the cover of darkness. You're running, no time to stop, no time to look back. You've left everything behind, your family, your home, your life. All that matters now is freedom. You're not alone though. There are others like you in the same desperate rush toward safety, running from a past that tried to keep them bound in chains. You're part of something bigger, a network of secret routes, hidden sanctuaries, and people who risk everything to help you escape. So I did a whole episode last season talking about the Underground Railroad. Please go check it out if you want a full understanding, but here's the highlights. The Underground Railroad was not a literal railroad, but a giant network of abolitionists, safe houses, and secret routes used by enslaved African Americans in the US to escape to free states and ultimately Canada. It operated from the early 19th century up to 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation, peaking between 1820 and 1860. All caught up? Cool. So why did Canada become the terminus, the final destination, if you will, for freedom seekers? Escaping slavery was no small feat. It was incredibly dangerous and difficult, but the promise of life without chains was a powerful motivator, one worthy of any risk. And for those who could make it, Canada represented something life-changing, a new beginning. While slavery had been practiced in Canada since the arrival of European settlers, the abolitionist movement began gaining real traction after Britain abolished the transatlantic slave trade in 1807. A few years later, in 1833, the British Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act, which outlawed slavery throughout the British Empire, including in Canada. This law was a victory for millions of enslaved individuals, and it freed thousands of people who had been forced into servitude on Canadian soil. However, while the legal chains of slavery were broken, the ending of slavery didn't bring immediate or complete freedom for the newly emancipated. The abolition of slavery marked a significant chapter in Canadian history, but it did not bring about equality. Even after slavery was officially abolished, former slaves were still subjected to the same social and economic hardships they had faced before. For many, the promise of freedom was bittersweet, as they found themselves without land, without resources, and without the legal rights necessary to thrive in society. They were free in name only, but remained entrapped by the deep, pervasive racial discrimination that permeated all aspects of life, whether it was in the form of exclusion from education, limited job opportunities, or outright violence and intimidation. Take, for instance, the Black Loyalists, the descendants of those African slaves who had escaped or been freed during the American Revolution, and who were promised land and freedom by the British in exchange for their loyalty. The promise made to them was rarely fulfilled. See episode 12 for more details. Now, in the Upside Down, aka the United States, they continued to uphold slavery by passing the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. This act not only made life more of a nightmare for those seeking freedom, it essentially made every free state in the US a hunting ground for enslavers. It allowed slave owners to pursue and capture runaway slaves even in states where slavery was illegal, and bring them back into bondage. Now imagine thinking you're free at last, and then the United States drops this act. Now you have to uproot yourself again and find somewhere else to go, and that somewhere else was Canada. Once an enslaved person crossed into Canada, something remarkable happened. They were legally considered free. The freedom they found wasn't just symbolic, it was tangible. They could now live free lives without fear of being recaptured as long as they remained on Canadian soil. This legal freedom, combined with the efforts of abolitionists, made Canada the ultimate sanctuary. Canada's extradition laws are tied to the story of one couple, Thornton and Lucy Blackburn. Thornton Blackburn was born into slavery around 1812 in Maysville, Kentucky. He met and married Lucy, aka Rutha, at the age of 19. Shortly after, Lucy's owners died, and plot twist, her owners were basically bankrupt. Now, fearing that Lucy would be sold into the Deep South and trying not to lose his new wife, he got some forged freedom papers. And on July 3rd, 1831, the couple took those forged freedom papers and began to make their way to Michigan. After living in Detroit for 2 years, someone recognized Thornton in the street and snitched on him to his old slave owners, leading Lucy and Thornton to be arrested as fugitive slaves in 1833. Their impending return to slavery sparked the community to rise up. The black community got together and cooked up a rescue plan. Carolyn French and Tabitha Lightfoot dressed up real nice and went to ask the jailer if they could pray with Lucy. They stayed until nightfall praying and left crying and covering their faces as they walked out of the jail. It wasn't until morning that the jailer noticed that Lucy was missing. And in the cell was Carolyn French, who had swapped clothes with Lucy. Lucy was smuggled across the Detroit River to the safety in Amherstburg, Upper Canada. Thornton's escape was a little less covert. The anti-slavery citizens of Detroit refused to let Thornton go back into slavery and stormed the jail and broke Thornton out. That's it. They raided the jail and got homie out. This led to Detroit's first race riot, now known as the Blackburn Riot. While in Canada, the Blackburns were arrested again. While in prison, Thornton dictated a letter to the Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, Sir John Colborne. A letter that basically stated that they had done no wrong in Canada and they should be permitted to pass their days in Canada as free people. Now, Colborne had no intention of sending the Blackburns back to slavery. So, Colborne told the acting governor of Michigan at the time, Stevens Mason, something along the lines of, "We cannot send an accused criminal to a jurisdiction where the punishment for the crime of which they're accused is harsher than our laws would allow." Those words now serve as the foundation of Canada's extradition law. The Blackburns went on to live in Toronto, where they made a lasting impact. In 1837, they started the first taxi service in the city, which the Toronto Transit Commission, aka the TTC, later adopted. They also became active members of the Toronto African Canadian community, including attending the North American Convention of Colored Freemen in 1851. Thornton and Lucy Blackburn are just one example of thousands of freedom seekers who made Canada their home. Stories that are often lost to history or yet to be fully uncovered. After making it across the border, the journey did not end. In fact, for many, arriving in Canada, it meant starting a whole new chapter in a new land with its own set of challenges and rewards. The initial relief of escaping slavery was often tempered by the struggle to rebuild a life in an unfamiliar land. The perfect example of this is Josiah Henson. Josiah Henson was born into slavery in Maryland in 1789, and he endured the brutalities of enslavement. But his determination to secure freedom for himself and his family led him to Upper Canada, now Ontario, in 1830. His story is one of escape and remarkable contributions to the creation of a thriving community for Black Canadians. Henson played a pivotal role in the Underground Railroad itself. After escaping from slavery, Henson established himself on the Underground Railroad as a conductor, helping 118 enslaved individuals escape to freedom in Canada. Henson risked his own life to lead his fellow enslaved people across the United States. His courage and resourcefulness and commitment to the cause of freedom made him a key figure in the Underground Railroad, contributing to the liberation of many who sought safety across the border. Also, once Henson reached Canada, he didn't just stop at securing his own freedom and being a conductor for 118 people. He became a community leader and advocate for those who had followed in his footsteps. In 1841, he founded the Dawn Settlement near Dresden, Ontario, which became a beacon of hope for many former slaves. The settlement was established to provide refuge, education, and opportunity for freedom seekers. At the Dawn Settlement, people could begin anew, learning skills to sustain themselves and build a future. Henson's vision was to create an environment where Black Canadians could thrive, not just physically, but intellectually and socially as well. In addition to founding the Dawn Settlement, Henson co-founded the British American Institute in 1842, a school that offered a broad education, including trade labor instruction to members of the Black community. This was a revolutionary initiative, as it focused on teaching formerly enslaved people practical skills to help them integrate into Canadian society, where opportunities were often limited due to racism and discrimination. Through education, Henson sought to empower those who had experienced the traumas of enslavement, and he understood that true freedom was about self-sufficiency and dignity. Henson's work was not confined to his local community though. He became an active abolitionist, traveling throughout Canada, the United States, and even to England to raise awareness about slavery and to advocate for the freedom of African Americans. His speeches helped spread the message that Canada was a safe haven for enslaved people, and he sought to generate both moral and financial support for the abolitionist cause. In 1849, Henson published his autobiography, The Life of Josiah Henson, formerly a slave, now an inhabitant of Canada. This account of his life as an enslaved person and his eventual escape to Canada helped to humanize the struggle of millions and provide a stark, first-hand perspective of the horrors of slavery. The autobiography quickly became an important text in the abolitionist circles, passed around secretly to raise awareness about the brutality of slavery. Its impact was so profound that it's widely believed to have inspired Harriet Beecher Stowe's famous novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, one of the most influential works for the abolitionist movement. In fact, when Stowe faced criticism for her portrayal of slavery, she referenced Henson's autobiography in her Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, 1853, to validate her novel's depiction of the institution's cruelty. We see from Henson's story that life in Canada after escaping was complex. Yes, you had freedom and opportunity, but it was also coupled with racism and prejudice. Canada was a haven, but it was far from heaven. The idea of Canada as a promised land was often romanticized, but the reality was more complicated. Yes, freedom was legally guaranteed, but the path to a better life was paved with challenges that many were unprepared for. Canada's legacy as being a land of freedom and equality has undoubtedly played a significant role in shaping its multicultural identity. The presence of thousands of Black Canadians helped to form the multicultural fabric that defines Canada today. From their involvement in building infrastructure to their contribution to the arts, Black Canadians have a permanent influence on the country's development. Canada's role in the Underground Railroad also influenced global abolitionist movements. It became a beacon of hope for other freedom movements around the world. By providing a safe haven for runaway slaves, Canada not only helped reshape North American history, but also helped contribute to the broader fight for human rights and justice. In contemporary Canada, the legacy of the Underground Railroad continues to shape discussion around race and immigration. Black Canadians continue to be at the forefront of social justice movements, and efforts to preserve Underground Railroad sites, such as the Harriet Tubman Museum and the Buxton National Historic Site. We need to keep this important history alive, as well as uncover lost stories. Alright, key takeaways. Canada became a key destination for those fleeing slavery through the Underground Railroad. The legal abolition of slavery in Canada, combined with the status under British law, meant that once freedom seekers crossed the border, they were legally free and protected from being recaptured, offering a tangible escape from the horrors of slavery. While Canada offered freedom, the journey didn't end at the border. Former slaves like Josiah Henson faced the complexities of rebuilding their lives in a new land where racial discrimination and economic hardships persisted. Despite these challenges, many established thriving communities and contributed to Canadian society through education, labor, and activism. Canada's role in the Underground Railroad had a lasting impact on both its own multicultural identity and the broader abolitionist movement. The freedom seekers helped shape Canada's history, contributing to the country's development in various fields. Lastly, if you have a chance to watch Carolyn Tuesday, it's pretty dope. Go check it out. Alright y'all, that's it. I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this episode, please drop a like and a comment, and consider following the podcast for more of your favorite anime-infused Black history. Until next time, peace.